We'll go ahead and call this work session to order on annual property valuation. Start with introductions, starting on this side.
Suzanne LaFrance. Mixalatel.
Felix Rivera.
Crystal Kennedy.
And then it appears we have Mr. Constant here, Mr. Weddleton here, and I think that's it. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So yeah, welcome to the annual property appraisal where we do our annual evaluation report. Again, my name is Jack Davis. I'd like to say first, thank you for your time, and then also I want to say thank you to my staff. They largely were the ones to do this. Felt that I couldn't do it. So we do have some of the staff in our with us. We have Jerry, our chief appraiser. We have John Woodkey, deputy director, and we also have Justin. So, first thing I want to talk about is just really briefly the overview of the property appraisal assessment. And so, really at the bottom of this, you can see here there's exemptions in red and there's valuation in blue. Effectively, what property appraisal does is we administer exemptions and we value property. On an annual basis, we administer exemptions. Also, every 6 years, we are required by code to inspect property. So, if you see someone with an MOA vest measuring the side of your home or your neighbor's home, that is most likely us. January 1st is when all taxable value is assessed. That's effectively our lien date. The snapshot, as you could call it. That does kick off a series of dates. The first one is really where staff becomes busy with appeals. That is typically from about mid-January, and we have to be substantially complete on before June 1st. Then we start to kick into the valuation analysis, where we're valuing property looking at the next coming tax year. And then finally, we pick up new construction. That is generally done at the end of the year. Again, we want to be mindful of that January 1 snapshot. So we accurately get a total value and total taxable value. And speaking of total taxable value, here is a chart spanning from all the way back to 1980 to tax year 2020. And this is by real property and also personal property. And you can see here in the chart for tax year 2020, it's just a hair over $35 billion for this year. So it's up slightly, which includes new construction by about 1.2%. So looking at here, slicing and dicing the data a little bit more. First looking at total value, what it's comprised of. Largely it's going to be residential at 56% of the total value, so total value of $47 billion. Commercial at 23%, personal property at 6%, and then you can see the two yellow pie slices, the 10% which is government, which is fully exempt, and the 5% which is non-government, that's going to be typically fully exempt as well, which is going to be, for example, churches or charity. Now again, moving back to that taxable value, that $35 billion again. So taking out the exemptions, also taking out the partial exemptions like the residential exemption. Residential now is 61%, commercial at 31%, and personal property at 8%. So examining taxable value a little bit more. So residential, again, that same pie slice of 61%. As you can see here, single family, by and large, is the bulk of the value at $16.5 billion. So quite a bit. Commercial, again, that 31% slice. Industrial is the largest there at 3.1%, but obviously it's a little bit more similar as far as the total value goes there. Personal property, that 8%, largely going to be the businesses at $2.7 billion.
Okay, sure. Yeah, Mr. Weddleton.
Can you back up? So retail/food and beverage, is that inventory tax?
No, that's going to be the buildings. Inventory is going to be for that down there. So the inventory is going to be personal property.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
I guess it's specific then on the personal property and business. And if that's inventory, what all is considered inventory? Is it things that are in small vehicles that travel around, or is it just in a warehouse or a facility, or what all?
Yeah. So personal property for businesses is going to be, you have to be business to have it, and effectively anything that's not real property is generally considered personal property. So that would be considered, for example, inventory on hand, machinery and equipment. It does include, as you can see here, mobile homes, But yeah, as far as the businesses, that's going to be largely what it's going to comprise.
Okay, but it is also equipment. and-
Machinery and equipment, yeah.
Okay.
So like a
vehicles,
backhoe. Vehicles, if they're registered, we're getting taxed through the registration. If they're unregistered, like a backhoe, for example, that.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thanks. On the very same line, you know, you talk about property that's retail but not sold. Does that include alcohol stocks that are held pre-sale?
Yes, yeah, it's going to be an inventory for like a grocery store
Right.
that they're going to have on hand is going to include.
Same with cannabis and other products that are taxed in other ways.
Same with cannabis, you said?
Yeah,
Yes.
like, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Alto?
I'm thinking, does the business personal property tax also include the fixtures of the business?
Generally,
The value of the fixtures, if they're used over and over and over, because those aren't really inventory.
so for example, maybe like hotels where you have like all the beds and stuff.
Or
that
a
is
shopping
personal
center
property.
with like the shelving.
Generally, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yep. You can generally take it off without hurting the building. Generally, it's going to be personal property.
Thank you.
So looking at exemptions a little bit, so about 25% of the total value is exempt. And so I just wanted to break down and show you where those exemptions reside. So at the top here you can see the mandatory or state. So this is what the state statute requires us as a municipality to exempt. You can see at the top there, senior disabled veteran. This is your first $150,000 off of your assessed value if you qualify. That's a 2.5 billion, a little bit higher than 2.5 billion. Then the rest, then the next several is going to be government, and then down after that it's going to be charitable or religion. Those are going to be your typically fully exempt property that's not government. Now at the bottom you can see optional or local. That is what we chose as a municipality to exempt. And as you can see, residential, we chose to exempt residential, $2.2 billion. Just to refresh your memory, if you recall, 2018 we increased the residential exemption from 10% to 20,000. It's now 20% up to $50,000 if you qualify. Next thing I want to talk about really is just some things that really happened in 2019 as far as what's new with the property plays. So, effectively, three things here. We got the exemption review effort. I want to expand on that a little bit. The Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal System, or CAMA. This is our program of how we use to value the properties. And then we also have several new ordinances that I want to talk about. So starting with the exemption review, our goal with this exemption review is to increase equity within the municipality. So that being said, we want to ensure that people who qualify for an exemption receive an exemption, and those who do not qualify for the exemption do not receive the exemption. And so we have been reviewing for the last several years. Effectively, there's a one-person team, and there's about 6,000 exemptions a year that we were able to review. At that pace, it would have taken us effectively 15 years to review all of them, just given the sheer number that we have. So what we did, late 2019, we hired a staff, a team of 3, to beef up this review effort. This is a one-time effort. It should take about 15 months. And so far what we've done is we've been proactive. We've already sent out, in December we sent out a little over 1,200 letters to people right now that have the residential exemption that may qualify for the senior exemption. And you can see if you shift your attention to the right, letters to the seniors that may qualify. Right now this is a moving target, but largely we haven't received the applications yet, but of the ones we have received, most of them have been approved. And so right now it's about, it was 260 when I made this, and it's climbing. It's like now 330, I think, right now. So that was just in the last week. So definitely starting to come about.
Question on that, Ms.
Yes.
Kennedy?
Yeah, you said something about, these were people that had the residential exemption, and you sent out a letter thinking that at some point they were now qualified for the senior
Yes.
exemption. What's the difference?
So the residential exemption is 20% up to $50,000. It doesn't matter the age, just there's several things. The biggest thing you have to do is live in your home, primary residence. Senior, you have to be 65 or older.
But what's the actual exemption for a senior then?
150,000.
Oh, it can go up to 150,000?
Yes.
Okay, okay, thank you.
And you can combine them. So the 150,000 plus the residential, you get actually $200,000 off. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So for moving forward for this year, for 2020, we're going to start to continue to work on being proactive with people being qualified, but we're also going to follow up with exemptions that we flag for follow-up where we might think that they are not qualified. The second thing I'm going to talk about, again, is this computer-assisted mass appraisal project. It's an upgrade. Again, this is what we use to value, the system we use to value property. This was approved in 2017 by the Assembly. We started this the second quarter of 2019. The vendor that we chose is Tyler Technologies, which was formerly called CLT, or Coal Layer Trumbull. They are the ones that actually had our old legacy system that we have. It was implemented in the early 80s, so it's time for an upgrade. Currently, we're in the assess and define stage. You can see at the bottom, there's effectively 4 stages: initiate and plan. In this assess and define stage, what we've done so far is we have been mapping the data, so we're basically doing a conversion from the old system to the new. We've been reviewing business processes, refining our requirements of what needs to be done, and also we've been happy to say that we have the test environment installed right now. It's about...
So really briefly, if I may, and as Ms. LaFrance leaves, I think she, just speaking on her behalf, and I'm really excited that you have this testing phase and that the project will be adequately tested before we go live. So very excited about that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. We're excited for this too. It's gonna end up saving us money in the long run.
Oh, I noted you. Thank you.
Next thing I want to talk about is the ordinances. So there were actually 4 ordinances that were revised for 2019. First one is this corrective assessment. I believe most of you know, but the corrective assessment is basically what it means is we saw some type of error, we changed the value, and we sent out a new valuation notice. So what we did is we included the earthquakes. That was revised early 2019. And give or take, we had about 70 after the appeal season. So after the summer, or during the summer and forward, we had 70 additional applicants where we did things. So that really did have an impact. Exemption for downtown housing, that second one there, incentive for downtown housing, that was in March. Total of 3 applicants so far, and we certainly have also had a lot of inquiry from other businesses as well. We have the natural disaster. This is where we change the value based on some type of natural disaster. This is being primarily for fire or only fire. Historically, it's only for residential owner-occupied. It's now commercial. That was changed in summer, and we've had 4 commercial applicants because of it. And finally, we've had this exemption for new subdivided property to effectively incentivize large parcel development. That was towards the end of the year. So far, we've had no applications or applicants, but we've definitely had a lot of people call for this. And just anecdotally, they're really excited. Developers are excited about this.
A couple questions. So first, question for me on the natural disaster, specifically the fire. Did we get more than 4 applicants, or was that the applicants that we got and then they were all approved?
Those were the applicants that we had. I believe I know we did at least 2, it might have been 3 that we approved. One was actually the prior year that happened that occurred before.
Got it.
And those are just commercial. We did have also residential on top of that. We
Okay,
had
but
4 or
that's not
5
included
residential.
in the number.
No, because I was just trying to say what basically the impact of the revision was.
Got it. Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, so I understand these are applications. Do you have a sense of how many were approved?
I believe all of these were approved.
So
For the correct assessment, all those are approved. Downtown housing, we have, I believe, 2 that were preliminary approved, 1 that's still that we're still working on. Natural disaster, I believe at least 2, it might have been 3 that were approved.
So, because it possible at some point in the future to get a summary of the cost of these? Right, so we understand we made exemptions, these are the fiscal impacts, so we understand going forward. Because I know in particular with the fire and the natural disaster one, we went back and forth on doing it because of the potential threat it might have. So I'd love to track the actual cash.
Yeah, we can get that number now, what we actually ended up reducing.
Be great.
If you're here, if you want us to send that, we'd be happy to.
Yeah, thank you.
Correct. Okay. So moving on to new construction and assessed values. First thing I want to talk about here is the new construction. So what happened with this, residential you can see is up 4%, commercial is quite a bit down, minus 40% for this last year. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Will.
All the stuff they're building on the airport, do we get a piece of that, or is that?
I'm not. We'll find out. I think this coming year we'll find out with that. But as far as this year,
But in general, if they build a warehouse on the airport, that's taxable property.
generally, if it's a business that's taxable, it's going to be.
Okay.
When you get it. Yeah. So yeah, again, it's down. But a big reason for this decline is really there were a couple of projects that were large in 2018 that completed for tax year 2019, and then we just didn't really see a lot for this last year. So there's some volatility within that commercial data. And to give you a better perspective of the taxable new construction, I really like to look at things in perspective. And here, spanning 2006 to tax year 2020, looking at taxable new construction, you can see that it is down, like I said, about 16%, but in relative terms, it's relatively stable. Moving on for property, as far as the summary, this is including new construction. So residential, including new construction, is up about 1.1%. Commercial is up a little more than 0.5%. Personal property up 1%, but effectively that's looking at last year's numbers. We don't get personal property data until this summer when they report their numbers. Total value up about 1.2%, including new construction. On the next slide, though, if you take out new construction, the picture changes a little bit. This is when you start to see existing property. The general story here is things are relatively flat. Residential up a little more than 0.5%. Commercial effectively flat and down a negative 0.1% for a total of about 0.8% increase. So I'll expand a little bit now, just diving into residential, commercial, personal property, and then just talk then a little bit about the appeal season. So again, 1.1% increase for a total of $26.24 billion for 2020. Now, if you break it down a little bit further than that and examine it, you look at the top chart here by property type. Single family up a little more than 0.5%. Duplex, triplex up 0.5%. Condos up 0.4%, and vacant land was pretty flat. At the bottom, you can see here I have just single family. Again, bulk of the value is single family homes. And so single family homes percent change by the assembly district. Downtown, effectively flat, negative 0.2%. We have Eagle River, East Acreage, and South Acreage up right around 1%, 0.8 to 1%. And the West Acreage and Midtown pretty much flat.
I have a question for Mr. Constant, Realtor.
Yes.
Is that jive with what you're seeing?
Interesting, I saw a report today that shows the average sale price, not listing price, but sale price broke below $300,000 for the first time since I've been paying attention. And so,
That could be values went down, or the mix of was sold
yeah,
went down.
timing, but it's been
below
up around
300.
350, I think, 375 for a long time. I haven't back-checked that number. It definitely raised a red flag because it's such a big change from what I've seen. And so I would guess that the stability is accurate to my understanding of the market right now, but the stock is just deteriorated. You know, there is a slight increase in the construction, you said, in new homes, but it's slight.
And the MLS, too, it's been, I think the average sale price for MLS is up right around 0.5% this year we are ending.
Yeah, so I just have to back check that info when I saw it. I was it was surprising and it didn't ring true to me, but this does.
Good to know. Appreciate that. And also here's residential data. So looking at the number of listings, we do track listings. We don't directly value properties with listings, but we definitely are helpful for a gut check. Also, number of sales recorded for 2019 is about just a little under 2,900. I do have a slide, the next slide does talk about the number of residential sales, comparing it in context. Basically, it's the same as last year. 2019 sales, we have, of that 2,900 sales that we have been recorded, about 30% are disclosed to us. And so we are a non-disclosure state, as you can see in the bold in the bottom. So if you ever do want to disclose your sale price to us, first we say thank you, we do appreciate it. Second thing is, I just want to let you know, we don't directly value your home on that sale. We're not going to raise or lower just on that. We're going to use that to value the entire real estate acreage. So looking at the number of sales here, you can see again, comparing 2018 to 2019, the number of sales effectively the same as last year. Looking at the residential ratios, we certainly do look at residential ratios. These are definitely some of our, effectively our report cards, you could say. At the top here, it's looking at the list ratio, so it's the list value, average assessed value of the listing divided by that list price. 92%, we want to be right in the 92 to 93% range for listings, so we're pretty happy with that. The middle one, which is the bold, this is going to be the sales that are reported to us. Average assessed value of disclosed sales divided by that average sale price, 96%. That's, again, right where we want to be, is right at 96%. And at the bottom is just more of an interesting thing that we track, is looking at the assessed value, comparing that to the MLS average sale price, happens to be 96%. Now moving on with commercial, again, including new construction, up 0.6% for a total value of $10.73 billion. If you take out new construction, you start to slice and dice the data by property type. Fourplex is down 0.5%. Apartments are down about 0.7%. Retail up about 0.5%, largely for equity purposes. Offices are flat. Industrial relatively flat, 0.2%. Hotels are up a little over 2%, largely because they saw an increase in revenue this year, so that's a positive sign. And then land, we pushed up about 2%. Largely, we just reviewed the land and thought that it's prudent to do it, just again for equity reasons. Just like residential, we use sales to value property. We had from 2017 to 2019, we have 336 sales, again about 30% of sales disclosure rate. And of those sales, about 96% ratio, again kind of a report card, which is where we want to be. Now back to personal property, like I already mentioned, it is including a bunch of stuff. You can see here the pictures. We have mobile homes, like I mentioned before, airplanes, machinery, equipment, inventory. Again, comparing 2018 to 2019, because we don't have 2020 values yet, up about 1% for a total of $2.9 billion. Here's a breaking down a little bit more, just looking at businesses. Big point here is that businesses account for over 90% of the value. Mobile homes are about 3%, despite them having just as many accounts as mobile homes, so that is interesting. Oil and gas, $139 million for the last year, about 5%. And here's looking at the oil and gas, just kind of looking at by year. It'd be interesting what happens for 2020. But typically you can see it's been relatively stable, maybe a declining trend in that. This is going to be inventory that is destined to either the North Slope or somewhere else, but typically it's going to be on hand in Anchorage as of January 1.
Yes, it's Kennedy.
A couple questions, please.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, it's all on personal property. There's a couple things. One, is personal property, is there a one-day point in time where everybody reports that, or it's assessed on a certain day, or how does that actually work out?
Yeah, and so that's where I think a good example is this oil and gas property. So January 1 is their lead date, that's a snapshot, that's when everything is assessed at. And so this inventory, maybe it's destined to the North Slope. As of January 1, it's in Anchorage, that's the location where it'll be assessed. So as far as businesses with inventory, they'll say, as of January 1, this is what I have on hand, and that's what they'll report to us. And it is helpful because they also have to report to the feds, and that is, I believe, also by as of January.
Okay. Then can you also explain the section there about the business late and involuntary?
Yeah.
What that one is?
Yeah, so we have business, which is timely filed, and then business late, so maybe they just forgot to file. And so we'll call them and say, hey, did you file this year? And they say, oh, I forgot, now it's late. Or involuntary, which will certainly happen. Our personal property team does put a lot of time and effort into discovery of new businesses. And so that's where the involuntary can happen.
Okay, so there are times when you actually have to go out and knock on somebody's door and say, hey, we're here to assess your personal property.
Yeah, and they don't have to show us, and so a lot of times with involuntary, we'll do our best estimate to look at like businesses and say, this is our best estimate of what this company has on hand, the inventory, equipment.
Okay, so do you think for the most part that some of these smaller businesses, just a mom and pop shop or whatever, are actually taking some kind of inventory so that they can report that? Or are they just, I guess I'm just trying to figure out to what extent they have to go to comply with that.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because first we have a $20,000 business exemption. And so the first $20,000 of inventory or anything. So the mom and pop shops and everything else, that's typically going to be them. So we're not going to have to make them file. And anything over that is when we ask them to file. Back in the day, I mean, this is part anecdote, but when we introduced that business exemption, we actually had increased compliance and had actually higher values. We're able to shift their attention and have resources dedicated to bigger companies.
All right, thank you.
So finally, just to start to wrap things up, I just want to talk about the review and the appeal period. So I want to talk about last year's appeal, what has happened. Here's a chart from 2004 to 2019, looking at the number of appeals and corrected assessments. As you can see, from 2018 to 2019, it effectively doubled. So it did keep us really busy. A big reason for this was the earthquake. So we definitely were very busy with that through the beginning of the year. Through the appeal season, we had definitely more appeals because of it. And then again, that corrected assessment, we were busy even after the appeal period working that. So looking at the appeals, though, the 706 that were filed, by and large, the first thing you can see, the blue section of this donut chart, settled without a Board of Equalization hearing. By and large, the majority of those were settled without that hearing. And so a couple of things that I take away from this. First, I'd like to say that we do try to be reasonable when people do appeal. And so I think that this hopefully demonstrates that. We have an invested interest in resolving the appeal as well as the property. Of the ones that did go to the Board of Equalization, typically, I should say that a lot of times when you do appeal, most of the time they're decreasing value too. Some, to some degree. But of the ones that did go to the Board of Equalization, most of them don't have any additional changes from our recommended value. So I just want to summarize now, and then I'll let you go and say thank you. But I just want to do a couple key takeaway points. First, new construction is down this year about 16%, but total taxable value is up about 1.2%. The existing real property, effectively, it's relatively flat. Commercial is down to 10%. Residential is up slightly at 0.6%. And a couple of key dates here. Valuation notices will be sent January 13th. That's Monday. And then that kicks off a series of dates, which the first important date for you and or your constituents is the appeal deadline. That's February 12th. So, with that, I want to say thank you for your time. I appreciate your comment.
And Felix, I just add one thing to the assembly. Thank you very much. We put a call out, you'll remember, a year ago for a board of equalization members. We were successful. We had 14 members. They made it through the appeal process. 4 of those decided that 1 year was enough, and so we're back down to 10. So we are again saying, if you know of anybody who would like to serve the community by being appointed to the board of equalization, we would love to have them. Mr. Trainee did say last night that he would be willing to do it now, after saying he was going to do it last year, but then not saying it now, he's willing to do it. And then I think, as Jack may have mentioned, there's a very detailed addendum here about the appeal process for you to work with your constituents to answer any questions they might have.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
A couple of questions. Do we have time?
Yeah, we got time.
Hopefully it'll be that. So last year, as you know, we had kind of one neighborhood or two in the hillside, and then that one neighborhood in Girdwood near the highway that had substantial increases. And should we expect to hear similar things from different neighborhoods this year?
No, so I think there's not, as far as valuation changes, we were pretty conservative with not doing any modeling changes as much this year. So last year, some of those were neighborhood changes with the hillside, where there were a lot of neighborhoods that we consolidated and said, this looks more equitable if we would just combine these. Girdwood, we did increase condos a little bit. Single family did go up a little bit in Girdwood too. It is still a pretty good spot. That's the one shining star in the market, is really Girdwood still going up. But nothing significant like you probably recall the land value increase.
Right.
We didn't do any big changes like that.
Okay, so then, and we had some email exchanges on this, and I guess I don't know is certainly a valid answer, I guess. Can we exempt alcohol inventory?
Yes, well, I'm working with the legal on that. I think the short answer right now is we don't see anything that prohibits us doing that, but I just want to be a little bit more cautious before we officially say that.
So where would the prohibition come from? Marty's here. Would the state have any prohibition? Like, could we pick a certain product, say we won't count that? I'm looking at Marty for the
Yeah.
I think you can, but I'm also cautious about doing it.
Okay. And then, having asked that, does it matter? I mean, does the average bar have more than $20,000 worth of alcohol on their shelf, or restaurant at any time? I don't know.
It's the distributor's problem.
But they're not subject to the tax. So if we were saying, let's exempt people subject to the sales tax, let's exempt their inventory. I guess a package store, Brown Jugs and places like that, they'd be over 20,000. Okay, because I expect to have an amendment for the alcohol taxes that say something like that. So stop me if I can't.
Can I briefly add just to that?
Sure.
Could you, if you don't mind, do your best to come up with a rough number of what that amount would be and how much we're collecting from the cannabis businesses? Because I want to keep fairness in the deal.
Oh, for their inventory.
Yeah, and so I would just like to understand the fiscal cost if we were to do that, rather than say I want to or not. I'd like to know, is it huge, is it minimal, where is it at?
But I say there is no, fiscal cost. We will collect the same amount of property tax. It's just spread out to other payers, right? Anytime we have an exemption, we still collect X number of dollars. It's just not so much from that guy, it's more from this guy. Right. So,
Yeah, I get that, but my neighbors really are done seeing the property taxes go up, and so I just want to make sure we understand the actual numbers as opposed to just the conceptual numbers, as close as we can. I'm not looking for perfection.
Sure.
Reason.
Yeah, we can look into the alcohol and the marijuana as far. We'll probably do some type of maybe app. Well, we can maybe do. We'll work on it. We'll see what we can do.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you. Now I have to remember what my question was. Okay. A new construction. I'm thinking specifically of when a new home is being built, and if that is, do you assess it all kind of the same in terms of what its potential value will be? Or does new construction, if it's just a foundation, does it have a certain value? Or do you automatically assign it what you think is going to be its ultimate sale price?
So it's going to be largely single-family homes at the cost approach, and so basically that's how much it costs to build, and then add in your depreciation. Typically, new stuff doesn't have much depreciation, obviously, and then you keep it down. So with new construction, what we do is we try to go out towards the end of the year to be as close as we can to that January 1 lien date, and we say, oh, look at this house and say, oh, it's about 50% complete, and we'll say, okay, well, we'll try to reflect that value of where it is in that building stage for that, which would ultimately be what we would estimate to be the market value. Does that help or make sense, or?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of at what point something really does have the value you assign it. Because obviously when you're looking at a foundation, it doesn't have that value. It's about the potential value. So I'm just trying to figure out at what point you actually can say that this is the value of this property.
Truthfully, we are relatively cautious or conservative with new construction values. So like foundations, typically value are pretty low. I think it's like, I forget what it is, pretty low, like $5,000 or $10,000 for just a foundation. So we do add value. There is value because of the foundation, but we do try to be mindful that, yeah, there's a project there and not just, it's not a turnkey operation.
Okay. And then at the same time, that if that's a builder, a developer building that, they don't really, well, I guess they technically own the project, but they're not really the property tax payer, or are they?
It depends. If they're building it and they're owning it right now, they're the owner. It's we look at the deeds of really that legal deed of who owns that property. So.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah,
It
Mr.
just add a little character to what it depends means. It could be an individual who is having a developer or a builder build their house again. If you have a new subdivision going in, often you'll have a corporation that owns the subdivision and they're going to contract with the builder. And so the builder won't have the liability for taxes, it'll be the corporation, the developer. And then you get into scenarios where you have that set up, but in the subdivision, a builder will buy a set of lots so they can reserve them. And then once that title transacts, they're on the hook for the taxes. And so it can be very complex to determine exactly the nature of that question.
Thank you.
But typically, sorry, do you mind? But typically then, it's all assessed as of January 1st. So the ownership is all as per that January 1st.
All right. So, a couple things from me. So first, really want to thank you for the addendum. I flipped through it quickly. I think that's really great detail. And I think it's going to be helpful to the members. And so I'm looking at the clerk and hoping that we can email this out with a specific note that the addendum has a lot of great detail on the appeal process. And then second is on CAMA. So what is the expected go live date?
So it's going to be about a 2.5-year project. Just effectively started here in April. So it should,
Okay. So as appropriate, and when you think it would be helpful, I think it would be great to continue giving updates to the assembly on the project, and especially when we get close to the go live date.
Okay. Yeah, we can absolutely.
I'll offer that maybe we'll bring you an update in mid-year this year on where we are, and remind everybody that the very important differential is we bought this software as it was written. We did not modify it. We are installing it the way it is written, and we are going to learn how to use it. So the issues of customization that were a challenge with SAP should not be a challenge.
Sure, yeah, Mr.
So,
Counselor.
I think that what would be great as we get closer, though, would be having us prepared to communicate to the public how things are going to be different. We because although it's just a green card that comes, you know there are going to be changes. There could be a very broad recalculation because of some factors, and through your testing, it'd be great to see what those issues are so that we're prepared before the heat comes.
I think as you heard Jack say, I mean, they have a very clear and easy way of understanding what their report card is, which is how close is the assessed value to the sales values. And so part and parcel of the testing will be what is the old, because functionally it's the same software, just not on a mainframe, now it's on modern computer technology. And that's going to be the significant savings. It's $1 million a year of non-mainframe maintenance that we're not going to have to pay. But you're right, we will be looking very closely at what any kind of changes, and we will definitely bring that stuff to you if in fact it looks like that. But I mean, I think we're going to manage this project toward a goal of not having something like that.
Yeah, but I think what's going to happen is you're going to finally have a fairly accurate assessment, because it's going to be more swift and more current and more modern, and that accuracy is in and of itself going to cause pain, right? And so, because for a lot of properties in a lot of places, the assessments are very low relative to what's actually going on there, because the system can never really catch up. And then all of a sudden one day we have a new system, and everyone's going to be told, well, guess what? It's now within 95% of accuracy of the sales reports, when it was within 75 before. That's
So 90%.
I guess, before, and as we get closer, the tighter that number gets to 100, the more we're going to hear about it. And so, and I want us to get there. I just want to be prepared before we get there.
I think you should understand that we have no interest in getting to 100%.
Okay.
96% is fair and reasonable, and especially since it's a question of equity, and we're not going to change the amount of money we collect, it's just who we collected from. So we're running at 96%. Everybody.
Well, except the taxpayer.
Thank you. Mr. Webster?
So I'm getting off track slightly, but we all get the National Association of Counties newsletter. They had a big ad in there, and it says, I took a picture because it amused me, when a mistake doesn't just end up in an expense report, but a news report, government runs best with SAP. Didn't we have the opposite experience?
Wow. Lord.
To be fair, it's installed
Don't
and
bother.
running well. There were many missteps along the way in terms of training, implementation, and testing, which were very unfortunate, and we have hopefully learned our lesson well.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
You won't be here when we do it again, though. That's to translate 20 years from now.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the hope. All right. Thanks.